Well, good morning, everybody. Let me give you a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. Overall, we did see the models trend wetter with this system that will be coming out late this week in the central part of the United States. It is raining this morning along I-80, and it's going to continue to push off to the east. We're going to watch down here in Oklahoma for severe weather tonight, but this next system that comes out in the central United States is going to give us the risk of more severe weather right here in the central U.S., the Midwest region, as we get toward the end of this week. We've seen the western U.S. trough get deeper. We've seen this tropical system that could potentially develop here late this week into the weekend also have more of an influence on shore here, coming into the Carolinas, Virginia, up to Pennsylvania. Overall, we saw a warmer trend here as well across much of the eastern half of the country while we've maintained the cooler bias off to the west. That's kind of the big picture of what we're talking about right now for the United States. In South America, which is what we're going to finish this video up with, we actually saw a drier trend. We still have the wrong direction of the flow coming out of the subtropics into most of Brazil, meaning that we don't have the really wet weather in place that we need to get this crop started. So those are some of the big pieces we'll be following, and at the very end, we'll kind of stretch this out and see what we expect the longer range to look like here over the next couple of weeks and beyond. So right now, if we just take a look at the last 24 hours of total accumulated precipitation, let's actually, I think I'm recording this right at 6 a.m. Good, just got the newest update in. This is the heavy rain from the system yesterday. Remember that stalled out front as it started to pull to the north. We had a low pressure center develop, got pretty windy here, saw some very heavy rainfall amounts that moved through parts of coastal New England. On the backside, scattered showers, and then we watched that boundary right here sitting along I-80 start to deliver some rain. And this morning, that rain is moving into northern Illinois and Wisconsin. A couple of the storms that popped up coming off of the mountains here did produce some hail and some locally very heavy rainfall, but this is the beginning of what's going to be a pretty stormy week in this area. I did want to show you an animation of the last 12 hours or so to see the precipitation pattern here. So here's that low that ran up the East Coast. Here's the rain right along I-80 early this morning. You can see how far east it's progressed. And again, even though we saw some storms yesterday coming out of the mountains, coming off the Sierra Nevada, this is just kind of giving us an indication of the upper level flow that's going to be supportive of a very stormy week. We're going to watch again tonight this region right in through here for the risk of some strong to severe storms. Broader context on some of this rain that's moving right into this area. Over the last 30 days, we've been very dry in the state of Iowa and surrounding states. I mean, you can see it pretty clearly here. In fact, so much of the Mississippi Valley, the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, I mean, I can just go into every river that feeds into the Mississippi. We've seen more areas that have been much drier than normal over the last 30 days than wetter than normal. And so we need to see and talk about if this is going to continue to change, and we'll diagnose that again in just a few moments. Right now, this is what the latest 1 meter soil moisture availability in terms of percent looks like. This is a modeled value. This is not observed. But if the models don't get the soil moisture right, then they have a very difficult time with precipitation and every other variable that is, kind of there in the flux of the boundary layer. That's the layer right next to the Earth's surface. So we can use this as kind of a proxy just to understand what our soil moisture situation looks like. And it's just another way to kind of quantify the risk of continued drought in this particular region in the near term. So when we think about what's going to be shifting this around, let's start off with today's flow. This is what we expect the winds to be doing in the low levels by the time we get into this afternoon. And this right here is an important piece to this. So kind of on the tail end of this low, and this is Nigel over here, you can see there's a frontal boundary. It stretches all the way down here, and then it's moving around an area of high pressure that's over the south. Now, right here in the southeast, that's going to help us open up, that high pressure cell is going to open up what we call return flow. So we're going to start to see moisture moving back into this area of Oklahoma coming out of Texas. And it's actually going to start to moisten up an area farther to the north of it as well for later this week and stronger storms. And this big ridge that you see sitting off the coast here, this is not going to be there for very long. We're going to see a pretty big shift for the west coast as we progress farther into this forecast. But as it stands, that's going to set up a pretty good event down here for the risk of strong to severe storms, including some straight line wind damage and some large hail. Of course, with any storm in the southern plains, we can't rule out the risk of an isolated tornado, but I don't think that's the main threat today. Mainly a hail and straight line wind threat, but we do have a pretty sizable area here under the slight risk category. So if we kind of get an idea on the timing, I'm going to show you the high resolution rapid refresh model, and let's get it up to pace here. That's 6 a.m. So you can see I thought the high res, the HER, has a pretty good initialization with the 6E run. So we're going to use it. So as we play it forward, we see the showers moving here by this afternoon. Isolated storms possibly popping early, much earlier than I anticipated yesterday, coming through Oklahoma all the way down to the Red River. And then we're going to watch for those storms later this afternoon to kind of continue to move off toward the northeast corner. But there could be another round of those storms farther to the south this evening. Now, the timing of this is important, okay? Because, again, I thought this was going to be a late Tuesday to Tuesday night event, and now we're starting to see it showing up a bit earlier in Oklahoma. And as it does so, we're going to watch to see if the northern edge of this does in fact spin up to be a little mesoscale convective vortex. Because if it does, there's a pretty good indication that it gets pulled farther to the north as we work our way through the overnight hours on Tuesday into Wednesday morning. So you can kind of see it sitting there. Outside of that, we have another low that pulled into Washington. So late tonight through tomorrow, we're going to see the chance for some scattered showers here in parts of Washington, Idaho, and Montana. A lot of isolated convection still popping on that stalled out frontal boundary that made its way all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So that's kind of our near-term outlook for simulated radar. Okay, if we take a look at what's initiating this, let me just take you from Tuesday morning to about Tuesday afternoon. There is a piece of the subtropical jet right here. Now what we do with every time we see these pockets of faster winds, which we call jet streaks, and this isn't an overly fast one, like this is a fast one right here, okay? But what you can do is you can divide it up, okay? So I kind of put some crosshairs on it. This is the entrance side, and this is the exit side. So this is the left exit side, and this would be the right exit, and you can do the same on the other side. That left exit side is a very supportive area for divergence aloft, which means lift in the atmosphere. And that's what's going to help later today to initiate some of these storms over Oklahoma. There's a little shortwave in there that's going to do that. And then as we get into the overnight hours, we see that subtropical piece of the jet ends up by Thursday staying put, but then merging with a deeper trough of low pressure that comes in over Oregon by Thursday and into Friday. So now what you get is you get the enhancement of the curvature around this low pressure center in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and what's left of the subtropical jet scooting underneath it. So what this will do is this will enhance the upper level divergence out here in the plains for a low pressure system to develop and also be supportive of strong to severe storms on Friday. This is Friday afternoon and getting into Saturday. So we're going to watch this area Friday and Saturday for the risk of strong to severe storms. Now, what happens behind this is kind of interesting. We've been talking a lot about the subtropical jet, which right now looks pretty weak. And it's going to go weaker for a little while, as a much stronger polar branch of the jet comes diving in. So this is Saturday. Watch what happens as we go through the weekend. There's a big low that curls up in the Midwest, but this is now the new dominant feature in our jet stream flow. We'd seen the subtropical jet help out a lot, but possibly as we work into, next week and getting ourselves to the end of the month, we're going to watch a pretty active polar branch of the jet while the subtropical branch kind of just takes a little bit of a break. Now, that subtropical branch of the jet is what we're going to watch all winter. That's going to be key, and it's just not here now. But we'll see what this does overall to our pattern. So first, are we going to have any instability to work with? So this is a map, an animation of CAPE, convective available potential energy. It's a product of how warm and moist the lower levels of the atmosphere are and how cool and dry the upper levels are. So we already see by Wednesday afternoon, we're opening up a corridor in through here that's going to be supportive of storms later in the week. So let's get into Thursday. Let's play this out to Friday. This might be our first big surge. And what we see here is that CAPE values right in this area start to really jump up. We have values here, up to 2,500 joules per kilogram. That's a lot. So that would be Friday night. And then we work our way into Saturday night. And again, it kind of shifts right over into this area. So that's why we're going to watch these two spots Friday and Saturday for the risk of strong to severe storms. The Storm Prediction Center is on top of this as well. This is their outlook for day 4. So this would be looking out there to Friday and day 5 on Saturday. So those same two regions we just identified. So we're just appearing that the atmosphere is going to open up to the risk of some severe storms right here in the central part of the United States. So let's go have a look at it. European model today. This was last night, at 1 a.m. You can see where that low was still producing some heavy rain in New England. But by the time we get to 1 p.m. this afternoon, it's out. So scattered showers here, scattered showers and storms in Florida. We're going to be watching late this afternoon right here in Oklahoma. So from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., that's when the storms are going to pop. Now, I know you're going, wait a minute, this doesn't look nearly that impressive as the other forecast did, and that's because the ECMWF is not convection allowing. So it's giving us this idea, but remember, we're just going to watch the bigger picture with this model run. So then there's that potential MCV, mesoscale convective vortex, And the European model by Wednesday afternoon starts to pull that through Missouri into Iowa, Illinois, right here in western Illinois, possibly with some lingering showers. But the deeper trough is here, and you can already see that classic shape to the low pressure center that's moving through the Pacific Northwest. So that means more rain here as well. While we're watching this low curl up over the Rocky Mountains, because remember, it's kind of cut off from the flow. Remember how we saw it? The deep trough came in like this. There was a closed low here, and then the subtropical jet came into support from the underneath side here at the south side. While all of that's taking shape, opening up the Midwest here to storms on Thursday night, we're going to watch for some tropical development here just off of the southeast coast. Now, keep an eye on two things. This is Thursday, getting into Friday. Let's go right to Friday afternoon. So this is where we will see this corridor open for the risk of those stronger storms. On the backside in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and the Dakotas, this is all going to be the wraparound side of this low. So this is going to be more steady, widespread precipitation in this area Friday afternoon and evening. Then as we play into early Saturday morning, the low really begins to take shape here coming into the plains. By Saturday afternoon and evening, we can start to see the push of colder air on the northern side. But take a look at the now much heavier rainfall the models trended to yesterday. Parts of the Carolinas up to the mid-Atlantic with this coastal subtropical system that's going to try to move its way toward the north here. So this is what the end of your week and weekend look like. So let's go ahead and play through Saturday. There it is. See the low coming out? Heavier rains coming into parts of the dry sections of the Corn Belt here with the front stretching farther to the south. And then as I play out to Sunday, into Monday and Tuesday, that low clears. We do get some warmer air behind it, but that warmer air is because of the deep lows that are coming into the west. So the flow is going to go back over to something, well, not quite like that. It's actually going to look more like this. There's a ridge up here with a trough underneath it. So this is our setup as we kind of work our way out a full week in the models. Let's go ahead and take a look at how much precip we're going to get out of it. So remember, some of this already fell this morning, but as we play this forward, there's our I-80 rain. There's our storms tonight, the little MCV that could form, and the storms over Florida. You can see the isolated showers coming up in the Pacific Northwest as well. So through Thursday into Friday, getting to Saturday, Sunday, we'll go ahead and park this out there 1 week out. And you can see now what's expected out of the storm from the European model and the much heavier rain up the East Coast. Here's the new deep low that we're watching coming off of the West Coast. And we just played this out 10 days. It continues to try to put down more rain into some dry places here, very dry places in the Willamette Valley, up here in the I-5 corridor in Washington and Oregon as well. So that's your newest update from the European model. All right. Now, speaking of this tropical system that could develop here, I do want to show you this right here. See this wave? It doesn't look like much, does it? That's Lee. That's what's left of Hurricane Lee. And it is setting up a broader low pressure system that's going to hit the UK pretty hard here later on today. But this is Nigel. And following Nigel, we don't have a whole lot going on. So what we've got here over the next 5 days is we do watch Nigel kind of move its way up toward Iceland. We've got the 30% chance of development here. There's a 70% chance of development on the backside wave, which we looked a lot at yesterday. No real updates on that. And then, of course, we have this 90% chance over here in the East Pacific. So that's kind of what we're looking at from the National Hurricane Center. But if you get out there and just ask about the probabilities on this rainfall, this is what we're seeing through 10 days. That really dry spot in the country we talked about at the beginning. Okay, we'll just come back to it real quick. All of this. We now see out there that the forecast models are giving almost a 90 to 100% chance of grabbing an inch of rain right in through here. And that is a bit farther east than it was yesterday. Notice the rainfall probabilities have come up for the East Coast from the Carolinas to the mid-Atlantic. And much better rain being forecast now for, Montana and the Dakotas. And we need to get these rains in here to bring that soil moisture up. It does disrupt harvest, but it's really important for the soil to retain that moisture before we go into fall and winter. And it's also important for fall application in this area. So we need this moisture to get into here. Now, along the west coast, I want to watch this most carefully because we've seen the models overpromise rainfall in this area. But when I start to look out there and see the depth of this trough that's forming in the Gulf of Alaska by the end of the month, we start to just see much better flow, and it's been consistent. So we're getting more of this, and it makes this nice hard turn to run up into a ridge here, but there's a low underneath that. So we kind of get this high, over low block. I can't call it a block because it's not there long enough. but this split pattern that was not well forecast about a week ago to hit this area now. So let's go ahead and just kind of figure out what that means for week 2. Now, the newest model updates from the CPC and the the European and the GFS, they all agree on this. But the CPC is wettest in the middle of the country, whereas the other models are a bit drier in here. And I have to just ask that if we do end up getting flow that dives in like this, that's not a wet signal overall in this area. We're way out there at the end of the month. That's not a wet signal in this region because we have northwest flow. It's typically convergent. So you realize this, we're not exiting a jet streak, for example. It's just going into one. And the left side entering one of these is not a good spot to get rain. So I'd have to side, I think, with what the European model is suggesting on precipitation anomalies for week 2. That seems to be I think the best initialized and the closest to reality, I think, as we get out that far. But that gets you all the way to October 3rd, right? We're starting a new month here. Okay, what about the temperatures? Well, here's today's highs. Really hot Red River Valley of the North, much of the upper Midwest and northern plains. Cooler weather exiting east. As we play from Tuesday into Wednesday, that pushes into the upper Midwest. This, by the way, is just rain-cooled air on Wednesday. But watch the transition in the west as much colder air comes in Thursday. That's when that deep trough is here. All of this warmth is part of the opening up of the Gulf of Mexico to bring in warmth and moisture. And that's what's going to set up the severe weather event possible late this week. So Thursday into Friday. This is now Saturday. And what we're going to get out of this is rain-cooled air to the east here. The warm sector opening up in this low in the central United States and a deeper trough in the west. This is Saturday into Sunday and Monday of next week. Longer term temperature projections, this is your next 5 days, so that's the warmth opening up there. As we go from day 1 to 5 out to day 5 through 10, we just see the broader trough in the west keeping it cooler. And then we see, to start the month of October, mild conditions. Now, that's not what I anticipated when I talked about the beginning of October back at the beginning of September. I thought we'd see a big transition towards some cooler conditions here, but it may be delayed, maybe later in the forecast. And, maybe part of that's due to the fact that El Nino's kind of coming and going. See, this is the Southern Oscillation Index. See how it's bouncing up and down quite a bit? It's actually oscillating. Every time it makes this jump up, that's a weaker time period in the El Nino. But it's lately dropped way down here. So maybe in 2 to 3 weeks, we can get the effect of this showing up in our pattern. But as it stands, this latest kind of surge back down in the Southern Oscillation Index, which again, got to be below -7 to be considered El Nino, which we've maintained. But this latest drop down here may be helping the MJO make a move. So what you're looking at here is today, all the way through this to the end of the month, okay? And we're looking at the blue-green color. And what I want to see is the blue-green color slanting always on this. That tells me the MJO is progressing through its phases and moving to the east. Now, this is pretty quick that it's moving to the east when you look comparatively to how long it takes for it to normally do it. And it's this right here that right now is sitting over South America, helping keep it dry. But a couple of things here. If this does make this progression, this is going to affect not only U.S. weather, but South American weather. And that's where I want to finish up today's video. So when I look at it like this, I can look at it another way. So do you see the numbers here? We're like basically now in phase 3. It's going to go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Like that. That's what we expect the MJO to do. And you notice, okay, I know it's kind of an odd diagram to look at, but we're currently here, and all these squiggly lines represent where it's going to go. So we're expecting it to make that kind of turn. It's not strong. If the MJO popped way out here and came around, it'd be the most dominant global weather feature right now. But it's not. It's inside here, so it's closer to null space. But it's still going to influence the pattern. Now, what we can do with this is look historically at what it means to get the MJO to move from phases 3 all the way to phase 6, 7, maybe even 8. So take a look. Right now, if it pops out, I want to go here. Let's get these in the right order. There we go. Now, if it pops out in phase 4, which we think it's going to do in the near term, take a look at what it does. Historically, there's a trough off the west coast. There's a high over near the Hudson Bay with a low to its south. See that? That's what we've got right now. We've got this flow setting up. Remember, I just mentioned it with this high over low, but I don't think it's blocked. But this is almost exactly what we expect to see setting up by, next week. So this is already beginning to make sense. So if it continues to progress into phase 5, what we tend to get out of that is this trough digs but kind of makes its turn into British Columbia. We get this rebuilding of a ridge over the west. When that happens, the temperatures are going to drop again into the central United States. So when I say we're on a roller coaster ride of temperatures, well, the MJO is going to help out with that. So this would warm the West Coast back up and go drier. This would temporarily drop the temperatures in the Midwest, and we would go wetter here temporarily. But from there, if we keep the progression, so over to phase 6 gets really interesting. We end up historically developing a high over low block that is now off the West Coast. So this is the kind that brings a lot of rain into California, but not much into the Pacific Northwest because it's got to make the turn. This also delivers a lot of northwest flow, which is cold, drier. Now, this is what I expected to see to start October, but now it's maybe much later into October that we're going to see this. When I say that, maybe it's the second week of October that we get this colder air coming through. And should it align with the MJO, this will likely be the first frost event, maybe in that second or third week of October across a broad section of the Midwest, which honestly would be right on time for that area. While all that happens, the West goes over warm. The East follows with cooler weather. But here's the real thing. Let's just play kind of fantasy land here with the weather forecast models and suggest that the MJO actually comes out and makes its way all the way across the Western Pacific and ends up over in phase 8. Phase 8, we'd have just a weather party across the United States. This is what you want to watch out for all winter. Big blocking ridge over Greenland. Deep trough west. This sets up the whole country, except for Alaska, with crazy fun weather. When I say fun, that typically translates for everybody else to being inclement and not enjoyable. This would just set us up with a strong subtropical jet that meets up with the polar jet, and it's just going to rip off storm system after storm system in the Midwest. We may get here at some point in October, and if it does, that'll be a treat. That'll be fun to forecast, but it'll be a bit crazy. Okay, so I just want you to know we're watching these things. Now, I told you about the other side of this. The other side of this is South America. South America is struggling because of this ridge. The flow is coming around it, and it's pulling in the moisture from the subtropics. We talked about it all week. We've got to get the flow from here in order for the monsoon to really get going. So what we end up getting out of that is over the next 7 days, I just stopped it here. There's just nothing coming in. If you just take a look at this, 7 days out, there's just no moisture getting into this area to fill it in and bring in the moisture that's needed to get a crop started. And this is, what I'm circling here is probably 80% of Brazil's production. So we're missing that. And if you want to look at it on a broader scale, you can see how dry it is compared to normal here, while how wet it is down south. A couple other things to take note of. Again, we're watching a big storm system go through the UK today. Much of the rest of the Europe, main agricultural areas of Europe, like right in through here and then over toward Ukraine and Russia, are drier, stormier south. All right. You then see very late wet weather in India and right here in parts of Indonesia. But take a look at the heavy rains expected on the headwaters of the Yangtze River. Now, this is south of the North China Plain and the Manchurian Plain, which is where they grow a lot of corn and beans, but some very wet weather hitting some main ag areas here. Australia, overall drier. Okay, that's what I got for you today. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk tomorrow. Thanks.